Okay, now it's time for Brian Stelter, who is responsible for my waking up before noon on sleepy Sunday mornings. I've become addicted to his Sunday morning show, Reliable Sources, as well as his blogs and his tweets. And I have a feeling our other president listens to him and also takes a look at his tweets. I look at them, after all, because they're about my favorite subject, the media. And the president looks at them because it's all about his least favorite subject, the media. Brian's been writing about the media since he was 11. I caught up to him when he joined the Times in 2007. Okay, why am I a fan? Well, two reasons I'll give you now. One, if you watch Reliable Sources this past Sunday, one of his guests, Chris Rudy, a Trump confidant and CEO of Newsmax, after hearing Trump criticized, said that CNN never covered Obama for living in a bubble. And like 1/10 of a second later, Brian, without hesitation, shot back, "Don't say that. We talked about it. It sounded like a nice little scolding to me." Another reason, well, we have to go back to November 16th issue of The Atlantic, which wrote about the presidential race. Last Sunday morning on Reliable Sources, CNN's Brian Stelter asked his considerable audience to be on guard for one of this election cycle's most ugly features, fake news sites. He accurately called them, in quotes, a plague across the internet. He proposed a new rule for social media users: triple check before you share, and he offered some useful tips on how to do that. And then The Atlantic wrote a couple of unflattering things about CNN, but we'll skip that. And then it continued, "But I am a big fan of Stelter's work. He's currently the beacon of light at the news channel. His Don't Fall for Fake News advice, part of a series of commentaries he's been delivering, is a key reason why. In pieces like the one that ran on Sunday, Stelter has done what the traditional media have largely failed to do, leading the way in bringing media literacy skills to the wider public. Given the size of his audience on TV and online, it is probably no exaggeration to call him, as I did the other day, America's most influential teacher of media literacy in the digital age." What more can I say, Brian?
I was humbled by that quote in November, and I'm humbled to be with all of you today. I am very much figuring out what my beat is at CNN, what the job is for a media reporter in an age when the president attacks the media on a daily basis. So I come to you with some thoughts, some ideas, but with the admission that I am very much figuring it out, figuring out my role. I've been at CNN 3 years, as you mentioned, after coming over from the New York Times, and I feel like all of my programs, all my weekly programs before Election Day were just practice. They were, I was really just rehearsing. I was learning how to do the job. And now post-Election Day, the work is real and the work has potentially more consequence, trying to explain the media landscape to viewers and help figure it out. Just in the past hour here, since we've all sat down to lunch, the president has called Michael Flynn a wonderful man who was treated very unfairly. The president has condemned the ongoing leaks, saying these are illegal leaks that need to be stopped. He has, of course, been supported by many calls from Republicans in Congress for leak investigations. In the past hour, the president has been asked to speak about anti-Semitism in this country and instead talked about his electoral victory. He also, wish that was a joke, it's not. He also called on two American outlets during his press conference. One was the Christian Broadcasting Network and the other was the conservative website Town Hall. I'm relieved to be here with you all and not at work to have to talk about this. At the end of the news conference, CNN's Jim Acosta stood up, shouted a question, and the president ignored him. Omarosa shot him a glare, and that was the end of the press conference. Acosta said afterwards, "I tried." And that's sort of where we are right now. If I was to have to describe my view covering this new administration, if I was to try to characterize CNN's place in the media landscape right now, we're trying. And you can see that on the air and in our stories, I think, on a minute-by-minute basis. This is, in some ways, the best story that my generation of journalists has seen. And of course, it presents unique challenges as well. But I'll tell you briefly about my role, how I view it, how I view this coverage, and then get to the fun part, trying to answer your questions. The story of my career, if there is one, is all thanks to the internet, thanks to the World Wide Web. You mentioned I was 11. It's because my grandfather gave me a computer, hooked us up to the World Wide Web through an AOL dial-up connection in 1995, and as a result, I was able to make web pages. And I think about that as being the turning point for the rest of my life, all the way to CNN. Being able to create websites, things that weren't journalism, but certainly were journalistic. These were dorky websites about video games and books and movies. But that was the beginning for me of my obsession with media, my obsession with how people access information, why, in what ways, and how it's presented to them. So that was a through line for me, whether it was building web pages in the 90s, blogging about television news in the 2000s, and then joining the New York Times to keep doing that in 2007. I feel like, I'll admit this to you all because you'll appreciate it, I was reluctant to join the New York Times when I was graduating college. I was offered this job to go write about television. I resisted it for a while. I wanted to keep my old blog, which I feel like an idiot now saying that 10 years later. But I had to be persuaded to take the best job that's ever come to me. And once I did, once I realized what a gift I was being given, once I was inside the Times as a 21-year-old reporter, two things happened. The first was I was able to learn how to be a real newspaper reporter, actually learn the methods and the rhythms of the place and the print deadlines and all of that. The second thing that happened, and maybe this is no mystery to any of you, I realized how easy it was to get in the paper. Meaning, I imagine the New York Times is a place where there were thousands of people competing for a small amount of space. In fact, they've got to print a paper every day, and that was the best thing that happened to me, realizing that they actually needed stories, they needed more stories, they'd take as much copy as they could, at least at that period in the mid-2000s when the web was roaring at them and the Times was figuring out how to respond. So I spent 6 years there writing about television in print and online, working with David Carr, my mentor there, and with others at the paper. It was certainly a formative experience because it was teaching me how to be a true newspaper reporter. And jumping to CNN in 2013, taking over the program Reliable Sources, I now feel, you mentioned the word teacher, I do think I have a really special role now trying to help our viewers understand what all of us in this room understand about the media. I think what all of us know about how newsrooms operate, we take for granted that knowledge sometimes and need to help the rest of the country and the rest of the world have some of that same understanding. When you have a president calling the media fake news, or as you said an hour ago, fake media, it's such a corrupting, it has such a corrupting effect. Potentially is so destabilizing for our profession. And I think it ups the stakes to have folks on television and in print explaining why we do what we do. I guess what I'm saying is I think that President Trump is a media reporter full employment act. There are now so many stories to write. about the media, about our profession, and why we do what we do. You think about newsrooms, whether they're print newsrooms or television newsrooms or now the BuzzFeeds of the world. We have some pretty strange norms and standards that are maybe perplexing to the outside world, maybe surprising to the outside world. For example, I don't think a lot of readers or viewers even recognize that CNN has a big standards department. People that think about ethics and the legal consequences of stories, as well as typos, every single day. Some people might know the New York Times has a public editor, but I don't think there's an awareness of the layers of editing and the structures and the checks and balances that exist in these newsrooms. Of course, we've seen some of that erode, especially at smaller outlets, and there's real cause for concern about that. But I think I view my job increasingly as a media literacy job, trying to improve media literacy, help folks understand why we do what we do. Yes, to criticize and acknowledge failures and flaws, but also to address the strengths and the successes of the news business. You think about last night, for example, the New York Times at 9:20 p.m. publishing that story about pre-election contacts between Trump associates and Russian intelligence representatives. CNN at 10 p.m. published a very similar story. It had been in the works, of course, for hours beforehand. So you've got one of the biggest news networks in the world, one of the biggest papers, basically at the same time publishing these bombshell stories. And I think to a lot of readers and viewers, there's not a recognition of all of the work, all of the labor, all of the stress, all of the haggling with sources, all of the fighting with editors that goes into the production of those stories, that goes into the banners on the bottom of the screen. There are, of course, a lot of times where there's weaknesses and flaws in the coverage as well, but I view my role as being hopefully covering both sides of that. There was a mention earlier of alternative facts. And I remember the Sunday morning that phrase entered our lexicon. Kellyanne Conway on Meet the Press. One of the best things about my program at CNN is actually the time, 11 a.m. Eastern time. So it's a little bit after the big Sunday shows, after the Chuck Todds and Jake Tappers. It's a chance to consume and digest some of what was said on the Sunday shows, whether it was Stephen Miller or Mike Pence or Kellyanne Conway or whichever face of the administration happens to speak that morning. Kellyanne Conway spoke about alternative facts the morning after the 2 mornings after the inauguration, about 9:30 a.m. So by 11, we played the soundbite on reliable sources, and I noticed the banner on the bottom of the screen that my producers had written said, this is embarrassing. It said, "Alternative facts. Are they really facts?" Question mark. Now, I imagined my inbox at that moment overwhelmed by emails from angry viewers telling me they're not facts. And so that minute-long soundbite was playing. I emailed the control room, just one of my usual little, one-sentence subject line emails. It said, "Change the banner. They're not facts. They're lies." I was pleasantly surprised 30 seconds later, the banner said, "Alternative facts are lies." But it was a much more honest and accurate assessment. There's a lot this administration could do right. There's a lot this administration could do to increase its standing in the polls. But so far, we've seen this pattern of misinformation and mistakes, maybe unforced errors, et cetera, coming from Trump's aides and from the president himself. And whether it's the banners on the bottom of the screen or the questions we're asking on the air, I think our viewers are depending on us in ways that we haven't seen for a little while. There's obviously nothing new under the sun when it comes to this. We've had liars in chief before, things like that. But in this digital age, this intersection, this moment of an administration that is in disarray in some ways and is misleading in many ways, intersecting that with this digital media age where folks in some cases are consuming the news instantly and in other cases are overwhelmed by it all and need it digested by professionals, This is a fascinating moment and a great intersection, I think, to be at. Just thinking about my role, reason why I'm happy to be at CNN right now. It's a 4-part job. It's the show on Sunday, writing stories for the website during the week, going on television, talking about those stories during the week, and then producing a newsletter at the end of the night that hopefully lets me wrap it all up, sum up all that's happened. I'm finding the newsletter, whether anyone else reads it or not, it's good for my brain because it's a chance to digest everything that has happened in the news cycle that day. And I find myself wondering if there are new products, new shows, new news outlets, startups that actually need to be created in this moment of news overload, this moment of a news cycle that feels much more like a hamster wheel. I think a lot of readers and a lot of viewers are just overwhelmed by it, are deluged by it. And I don't have all the solutions or answers to that. I wish I did. I'd go create it. But I do think there's a lot of room right now for more explaining and more understanding, more ways to help the audience figure out what is really happening, what is really going on. That is where I would take a breath here and take your questions. I think that's the more interesting part. But I wanted to kind of outline how I view my role and what a fun moment it is to be at CNN. Who would like to go first? Yeah.
Hold on.
Oh, I think we have a mic. Good. Are you our Oprah who will work the room?
Yes.
Okay. Great.
Oh, thank you. Brian, you are so lucky to work with David Carr, whom you call your mentor.
Yeah.
What did you learn from him?
This is obvious to say, especially in this room, but the value of somebody who's been through it before. I mean, when the iPad, I remember the first time he and I played with the iPad, when the iPad was coming out, and his view of it was entirely different thanks to his decades in print. And so it was that kind of knowledge he brought that we don't actually have in many media reporters right now. Most of the folks that I compete with are in their 20s. They're either younger than me or my age. And one of the things that was so valuable about David was that expertise and knowledge. I would say on a more personal level, his joy, his joy for the work of journalism, not making it feel like work would be the better way to put it. His passion for a great story no one else has written yet, something that, introducing a new thought into the world, a new fact, right? If we've lived through anything in the past 15, 20 years, it's been this rise of aggregation, of everybody writing the same story, repeating the same thing, and his appreciation of setting the agenda and introducing something new in his column on Monday was something I took away. And I would also say his balancing of work and family was important for me to see, especially given what he had written in his memoir about his past before he got to where he was at the Times and with his family. It was inspiring for me to see someone raising children, and all of that, as someone who's now about to embark on that. So I took a lot of that away. He was really a father figure, and there aren't a lot of those people in these newsrooms, whether it's the New York Times or elsewhere. So I would say those are the main ones that come to mind. I quoted him on Sunday's Reliable Sources saying that journalism is a lifelong opportunity for learning. It's like being able to go to school forever, and I'm trying to approach CNN that way now and learn from the inside about that organization. Yeah.
Brian, one of the questions that's been raised recently, even in your blog, was whether Kellyanne Conway, who suffers from a huge credibility problem,
Yes.
should even be allowed to speak on news shows.
Right.
I know that whenever I'm watching a show and Kellyanne Conway comes on, the first thing I do is change the channel because she's going
I
to
turn the
lie.
volume up.
And
I do.
I'm just wondering
But I
what your
understand.
opinion is as to whether she should be brought
I get a
onto these
lot of
shows or
emails
not.
from people saying they turn the channel off too when they see Conway on, and that applies to other Trump aides as well. or to the president himself. The reason I turn the volume up is because, well, two reasons. I am expecting misstatements, and I want to know about them. And I want to see how the anchor is going to handle this interview challenge. My argument for booking her and for having her on television is that when interviewed by a professional, someone who is an advocate for the viewer, the interviews can be informative and revealing and newsworthy. And we saw Tapper do that last week with Conway for 25 minutes. He had the time for it, he had the bandwidth for it, and he had the mental agility for it to go toe-to-toe with her for 25 minutes. Where I don't think it's effective is these shorter interviews on television or these Fox News interviews that are more like chit-chats. There's always going to be room for that in this media landscape, but it's not beneficial for the audience. 2-minute interview with her or to let her off on these falsehoods. So for me, it's about the format in which Conway or other aides are interviewed. When in the proper format with the proper interviewer, I think it's right and I think it's worthwhile. I think we learned a lot from that Tapper interview last week in the way she approaches the interview. I mean, you could view it, through that lens, but I do think we're going to see more and more television networks think more and more carefully before booking her. We saw Mika Brzezinski this morning on Morning Joe say she's not going to be bringing Conway on again. I'm curious to see if that will last. CNN's only had her on one time since Inauguration Day, and that was the Tapper interview. There have been other times she was available and CNN has said no. That is a highly unusual thing for any network to do. It's not uncontroversial, obviously, to do so. But I think if we approach it from the perspective of we're working for the viewer, we're working for the audience, then that helps to clear up what the right answer is. I will admit even sometimes to forgetting that I'm working for the viewer, right? That if I'm booking somebody for reliable sources because I'm a big nerd and I really want to geek out with that person and talk media gossip or something, might be interesting to me, might be interesting to my insider clique, but actually isn't probably best for the mass audience. I'm trying more often these days to reorient my head around what the mass audience at home needs.
Brian over here. Mr. Stelter, my name is Lester Hyman. I live in Washington, D.C. And when my friend Sherry Henry called me and told me that you were going to be here today, I hopped on a train and came here because I have tremendous respect for what you do as a journalist.
Thank you.
Now,
But
question.
No,
No, I got a question. You had a meeting or an interview with Mr. Ruddy
Yes.
over the weekend, and according to I think the Washington Post, it says that he indicated to you that Reince Priebus is about to go, and I wondered what your reaction is. Is that something you have tracked down?
Ruddy is the CEO of Newsmax. For those of you who don't know, Newsmax, a small cable channel, big website. Trump and Ruddy are friends, and Ruddy pays to be at Mar-a-Lago and sees Trump at Mar-a-Lago. So last Thursday, I booked Ruddy for this Sunday. Friday night, Ruddy and Trump go have a drink for half an hour at Mar-a-Lago. I was thrilled because I knew Saturday morning I had a great scoop. I didn't know what it would be, but I knew it would be something. And Ruddy even previewed it on Twitter. It was great. So Sunday morning, Ruddy's surprise, the scoop he drops on Reliable Sources is Reince Priebus is weak. Trump needs stronger chief of staff support. You guys tell me. Was that thanks to President Trump whispering in Ruddy's ear or not? I think most folks assumed Ruddy was speaking for the president, dropping a hint to Priebus in public. Ruddy then denied it. But I thought it was a fascinating example of how Trump is resisting the bubble that any president is in, resisting the small circle that you end up in as president. He wants to speak with outsiders. He wants to speak with his old friends at Mar-a-Lago, and he's doing that. And Ruddy is an example of that, someone that he was able to spend about half an hour with. So on Reliable Sources, Ruddy says Priebus is weak. It certainly starts a whole new chain of conversation about whether Priebus is the next to go or is potentially going. The indication later that day is that Priebus calls up Ruddy after seeing him on well, first of all, the indication is Trump watches the segment, so let's see what that means. Priebus calls up Ruddy. They have a conversation. Ruddy says he's going to have an open mind now about the chief of staff, that he wants Reince to succeed, and he's keeping an open mind. And I spoke with Ruddy the next day down in Miami, and Ruddy's main message was, I would love to come on television and dismiss everything I said before and support Priebus in the future, but I've got to see results. And I think what we're seeing is Ruddy is one of a number of outsiders concerned about the way the White House is being run, trying to help the president in whatever way they view help trying to steady this ship. And I thought it was a fascinating example of that playing out in public. For example, after the Reliable Sources segment, Ruddy says he received calls or text messages from 3 different cabinet secretaries saying that they agreed with Ruddy and that there is a problem with Priebus. So it just makes you wonder how widespread this view is of this chief of staff issue. But it's hard to tell right now what's the top priority for the president. Where are the biggest challenges in his West Wing? Because there seem to be so many. You look at Spicer's briefings. You look at CNN has a story today by Dylan Byers about everybody at the White House swearing their support for Spicer, but that's not going to stop the rumors from happening with regards to Spicer's future. I think I've said this on CNN. I think I can say this here. When Reince and when Sean were appointed, I thought to myself, oh, okay, there's adults in the room. They are the ultimate Washington adults. They are the folks that reporters have known for years, trust at least to some degree, and would be confident that there would be adults in the room. That hasn't been visible for the past 3.5 weeks. And so it makes you wonder when someone like Ruddy says Priebus is weak, that would seem to support Ruddy's contention.
Brian, in the few years that you left the Times until you came over here, is this a new paradigm? Is this what the future is going to be from now on? Or is this just a one-off presidency, do you think?
What do you think? I'd rather ask you.
My own feeling is that once something is established, it continues to some degree. It's like a sort of natural selection, I think, and mutations. I don't know if it'll be as bad, but I think there's some form of it.
I think I generally agree with you that there isn't a going back and that this is not a one-off. With regards to the reality show nature of some of what we've seen in the past few months, or for the campaign the past 2 years. So what I mean by that going forward is I would expect future candidates to use some of Trump's tactics, the showman style, the celebrity appeal, the rallies. I would expect that. What shocked me during the primaries, and this is not a novel original thought, but it would shock me during the primaries, was that the rivals to Trump didn't adopt some of his techniques right away. Those rallies that Trump was having that were carried live on cable news, others could have been holding those events, being surprising, bombastic, unpredictable, shocking at times. Those also would have received cable news coverage. There were a lot of ways to get on television, and Trump wasn't the only, didn't have the only way. But we didn't see candidates try to learn from Trump's playbook, didn't try to steal pages until very late in the game when Marco Rubio had that weekend full of insults against Trump. That was that one-off weird weekend. It's the only time I can tell you that I think one of the other candidates tried to copy from the playbook. But in 2020, yes, I do think we'll see quite a bit of it, whether it's celebrities running for office, whether it's use of kind of improvised, bombastic rhetoric, that kind of performance. I, to some degree, agree there is no going back. However, if you look at the pendulum swings of the last 20 years in presidential politics, we're swinging back and forth between opposites. And I do wonder if the swings are happening in more extreme fashions, what the next swing is. And does it flip over like a swing set? But I'm curious to see what that pendulum swing will be. The only other thought I would share on that is that the media landscape may look considerably different 4 years, or 3.5 years from now. If this was a cable news and social media election, I wonder what the next frame of that next one will be. Probably will still be a cable news election to some degree, or to a large degree, but if this is a Twitter president, I do wonder what a Snapchat president looks like. And maybe the point is we won't be able to see it because it's not permanent, but I do wonder what that next innovation, for lack of a better word, will be.
Brian, I feel compelled to follow up on Jerry's question. It seems to me personally that the danger of this president to our democracy is the delegitimization of the media. And that is serious because a large number of people in the American electorate are getting the feeling that they cannot trust the media. And if the media is going to conduct its usual purpose of holding truth to power, and that gets diminished, does that diminish our democracy?
Those are the exact conversations I'm trying to have on television, and I don't think we should shy away from some of the elephants, there are aspects about our politics today folks are wary of talking about on television. One is authoritarian tendencies of the administration. And so I'm trying to book guests who will have those conversations. Evan McMullen, for example, recently. David Frum, of course, has written about this in The Atlantic. Another conversation that's hard to have on television is about the president's stability. We tried this over the weekend with Andrew Sullivan, who has raised Trump's mental stability. We taped it ahead of time because I wanted to be very careful. I wanted to challenge him in this interview. But I thought it was a worthwhile topic to have, a worthwhile conversation to have on television. Because there are a lot of factors here that are so unusual. Whether it's his rambunctious style on Twitter, or whether it's his comments about law and order that raise authoritarian alarms. And of course his delegitimization of the press is another example of that. I have a hard time with the word delegitimization. I've been trying not to use it on TV so much because it can feel rather vague. I try to talk more on television now about attacking the press, bypassing the press, dismissing the press, and try to put it into terms that viewers can reckon with and can see for themselves. When he skips the CNNs and the APs of the world and calls on the Christian Broadcasting Network, that's a tangible one that we can cite. When he says CNN's fake news, but then Kellyanne Conway says CNN's not fake news, but then we all know it's not fake news, but then he calls it fake news, that's a tangible, BS comment that we can hold on to. And I think a couple responses to that are in order. A couple responses to his attacks on the media. Number one, at least in my mind, is we need to have our eyes open about how bad it can get. And I don't think a lot of journalists have necessarily in their minds gone all the way down the road to know how bad it can get. And I'm not here to hope for this or to give the president any ideas. But when it comes to tax audits, the use of the Espionage Act, the attempts to sue newspapers and digital outlets and television networks, and probably steps beyond that I haven't reckoned with yet, I think media lawyers and newsroom bosses have to reckon with how bad it could get. We're not anywhere close to that, it seems, right now. He hasn't booted anybody out of briefings or anything like that. But I look at the election a bit like it was a failure of imagination, meaning that a lot of journalists, myself included, didn't necessarily imagine and go all the way down the road on what a Trump presidency could be and how likely it could be for him to win on election night. I don't want that failure of imagination to happen again, and for anyone to be surprised if there are extreme tactics applied to try to stomp out news outlets. So that comes to my mind first. Second, I would say if all of us, and not just media reporters, but anchors and writers and editors, can do a better job defending and explaining why we do what we do, I think the audience is listening. Certainly, even if there's a lack of trust, there isn't a lack of viewership and readership. We're seeing cable news ratings through the roof, broadcast ratings higher than usual, huge traffic to news websites, and a lot of engagement on social media. So if he's trying to attack the press in order to erode our audience, that isn't necessarily working. There is a harder to reach segment of the audience that may be Trump loyalists. And I think there's a separate conversation about how to reach those voters. But there's a big majority of the country that is tuned in and watching and reading. And with the attention that they're granting us, we can advocate for them and identify why we're in this business and why we have a role to play. I look at the data, the traffic, and think that the audience is there and is with us despite these day-to-day attacks. But then number three, I would say, and I've heard this in newsrooms, including CNN, to triple down on accuracy, to not make sloppy mistakes right now, to not give the president any weapon that he can use against the press is crucial. And we saw that on day one, this MLK bust mistake that was turned into something that was bigger than it actually was. That was used against the entirety of the press corps in a way that was obviously, it was being exploited. But we have actually not seen many mistakes like that in the past month. I'm relieved to say that that was the exception to the rule. There actually have not been many embarrassing, boneheaded moves, sloppy stories, retractions. The coverage has been very robust and very strong and very accurate. And I think there's just an increased pressure on newsrooms to continue to get it right and to rely on those standards departments. In my very small example here at CNN, my stories are being reviewed by a larger number of editors than they normally would be. I want a second or third or fourth set of eyes before publishing. I want to be confident that we've thought through the words that I'm using. Last week, when we wrote about the president lying about the murder rate, before using the word lie, had a conversation with the head of standards of the whole company to be confident in that decision. So I think those are the three pieces that come to my mind. We do need to think through how bad it could be getting with regards to attacks on the press. But the audience is with us to a great degree, and we can do more to explain what we're doing and work even harder to be accurate about it. The one other thought I would add to that is this segment of the population that has opted out of journalism, to use a Jay Rosen phrase, the NYU professor, he describes it as opting out of journalism. And the reason I like that framing is when you are surfing right-wing blogs and reading Facebook for your news and trusting every word Trump tweets, you've essentially opted out of what we do for a living. It's not that you even necessarily trust Fox News. You may trust Sean Hannity, but not the journalists at Fox News. So if you've opted out of journalism, there's a huge opportunity to try to win some of those folks over and to share with them reliable, accurate information. Not the easiest task I've ever tried to describe or take on, but I find myself thinking a lot about what can newsrooms be doing to engage that population that does call CNN fake news, does agree with the president, doesn't actually know what I do every day, assumes the worst about me and my colleagues. That's the position that I'm seeing some of these people come from, and I'm not trying to paint with a broad brush. I'd much rather be very careful with these words, but what I see on my Facebook feed and on my Twitter feed and in my inbox from these people that have opted out of journalism, they only know about CNN what they've read on their Facebook feed, about the stupidest mistakes we've made. They only know about CNN words that might slip out of a person's mouth 2 years ago that have been twisted into something nefarious. They only know about CNN one stupid thing that a former commentator did with the Clinton campaign. They don't actually know what CNN or the New York Times or other news outlets are doing. They only know this fictional version of CNN. How to reach those folks and have them understand what we really do on a day-to-day basis in journalism is a tall order, but definitely one worth taking on. And so I find myself wondering what I can be doing more of to try to have those folks understand that we're not fake news, essentially.
I wanted, Brian, to follow up on what you just said about Fox News. Could you comment on the nature and quality of Fox News' coverage of the Trump story now, whether it's monolithic, whether there are any cracks through which integrity is actually seeping through, and the relationship of Trump and Murdoch.
Huh. I would start by saying that CNN's a big place, and so is Fox News. And inside Fox News, there are real reporters doing real journalism who are pissed off when Sean Hannity says journalism's dead. I think that's so insulting when Hannity says that. Almost every day he says on his show, journalism died, journalism's dead. It's so insulting to his colleagues who work for Fox News every day doing real reporting. But of course, the Hannitys of the world are what Fox is best known for. And so if we take that part of Fox as a political operation, not the newsroom, but the political operation, it is clearly pro-Trump in its day-to-day tone. I think how the owners of Fox News view it is a little differently. And there's probably some credence to their view, which is that they're not a pro-Trump network. They're a network from the right that is holding Trump accountable from the right. And I'm looking for signs of that. That's what I think is an interesting possibility for the next 1, 2, 3, 4 to 8 years. I'm interested to see in what situations do the Hannitys of the world hold Trump accountable from the right, and what that looks like and what that sounds like. Because when I watch Fox and Friends, the entertainment show in the morning, that is a pro-Trump show. It's not a journalism product at all. This morning on Fox and Friends, the host said that leaks do damage to all of us as Americans. They said the president should, quote, do something about it. Pretty close to calling for prosecutions. That's obviously just an entertainment show. I wish it was better labeled. I wish that there were clear lines between the Fox newsroom and the political opinion operation. But the tone from Fox and Friends in the beginning of the day and Hannity at the end of the day right now is pro-Trump. And if they're going to hold Trump accountable from the right, I'm curious to see what that looks like. One other thought I would have on that is that Fox is increasingly, I said this on Twitter this week, it's increasingly it's close to becoming a 24-hour-a-day media criticism channel. Of course, Fox is the media, so when they attack the media, it's rich. But I think there is something interesting going on the right. The amount of media criticism that's being produced, not necessarily fact-based or reported-driven, but complaints and opinions about media coverage. I think what's happening, I was talking with Ben Smith at BuzzFeed about this, I think what's happening is that one way to not be defending Trump, but to be taking Trump's side, is to attack the press, attack the real press that's doing the day-to-day work. And that's what we see from the Hannitys of the world. It's another way to be on offense and support the president is to bash the media, to complain about the media, to accuse the media of all manner of wrongdoing. You look over the weekend, Trump tweeted about a Fox segment that he saw. He saw this segment on Fox where it was about how Bernie Sanders made a joke about CNN being fake news while on CNN. And then there was a technical glitch. And of course, Trump said that's because we cut him off from making a joke about calling CNN fake news. Now, Trump was wrong about that, but he saw it on Fox. That's a classic example of a Fox story about, the media. So we're seeing Fox as this almost 24/7 media criticism channel. And what I hope is that some viewers see through it, know what it is, recognize what it is. I wish there was better labeling for it. But I don't want to say any of that and diminish the newsroom, because we're seeing John Roberts and other Fox correspondents asking questions at the White House, asking the same kinds of questions that other reporters are asking. And to the extent that the president's only going to call on conservative outlets, that means that the John Roberts of the world have a really important job and a real challenge before them. If they're going to be able to ask questions at times when ABC and NBC are not, then I hope we're going to see what holding Trump accountable looks like at Fox.
Brian, how guilty do you feel
Whoa.
that you never exposed Roger Ailes as a woman abuser?
If I had known, yeah. I do look. I did go through my notes, from my TV. I have my Gmail, the same Gmail account for 13 years. So I've got all my emails from my blog, all the tips that ever came in, all the emails from Fox people. I did go through last summer, trying to see if anybody had ever indicated anything, and came up empty. And that was disappointing. Although it would have been even more disappointing if it had been there and I hadn't paid attention at the time. I would defer to the Gabriel Shermans of the world who have been leading on that front. Because in that case, Sherman, in his book several years ago, mentioned a couple of cases of improper behavior, and in retrospect, he was pointing the way forward a little bit several years ago.
Just to follow up on that, what's your view of Megyn Kelly going to NBC?
A mystery. A mystery. I would like her program to be a success, because I would like more news programs on broadcast television. We've seen so much erosion in the amount of time on broadcast TV for news. So if she can make a Sunday night news magazine work, that would be a good thing for the news industry. But I think it's fair to say the conventional wisdom in the industry is that this is going to be very hard for her to pull off in the mornings and on Sunday nights. So let's see if there's a great story for me to write 2 years from now about it being a huge success for her.
Question. I'm going to follow up on the issue of the divided electorate.
Yeah.
And the fact that there are these people who will not watch a legitimate news operation and are now being told that it's all fake news and terrible. And you have a good program, and a lot of people are writing good things in print. There's wonderful work being done, but what bothers me is that we're all preaching to the choir. And instead, how do we get to the people who really are listening to Trump, who really believe that the New York Times and CNN and everybody else is doing fake news? And I have one thought. First, you have to go where their eyeballs are. And it seems to me that the media, and this is going to be something that has to happen at a higher level than you or the rest of the people in this room, but the people who are managing the media need to start some kind of a serious advertising campaign. And a serious advertising campaign that's on the Home Shopping Network or Christian Broadcasting or all of these places that says, we are serious reporters, we are out to follow and find the truth. And by the way, here are friends who died in the course of that. This is serious business, and it matters. And show, here's what happens when people believe the wrong and show a country where it's been overthrown. Somebody's got to get that message out there, and you got to get it to where they're watching.
I would love to go launch that with you. I agree. I have been wondering to what extent there should be marketing campaigns in that vein. We've seen individual news outlets like the Times gaining subscriptions and running ads. They're sort of subtweets of the president suggesting you should subscribe because of the president. We haven't seen an industry-wide effort, and I'd be curious to see what that would look like. I would also be interested to see what the entertainment, what a drama or a comedy or what kinds of programs or movies that depict the journalism world would help folks to understand how it really works.
Well, the best thing going is the late night comedy.
Right.
That requires a degree of smarts for watching it. You've got to get deeper down, lower down.
But I'm with you that and this isn't any individual reporter's story, it's not any individual beat, but the overarching story that maybe we're all telling, and we should probably do a more clear job telling, is the divide, this 50-50 America in all of its facets. Or sometimes it looks like it's 45-55 America. It's hard to tell exactly, but it's essentially 50-50 America. The story is told in bits and pieces, but it's the overarching story. And some of those folks in the, I suppose, the other 50% that is sometimes stereotyped as being these folks that are not trusting the news, some of them are watching and reading and viewing and listening, but many of them are not. And we have so much work to do to not just to regain trust, but actually to create trust for the first time in some of those cases.
Brian, we have time for 2 more questions.
Okay.
One comes from here.
From here. Phyllis Malamud. That's a very powerful idea, and I hesitate to go back to Rupert Murdoch, but since the name was mentioned, I was wondering what is being said, not just about Fox, but Murdoch's impact on the Wall Street Journal and their coverage of Trump and the Trump team. What do you hear, given the fact that there are people questioning whether the Wall Street Journal is holding back?
There's a divide for sure inside the Journal, and the dissenters are wondering how much of an impact, how much of an influence Murdoch is having. It's invisible, though, to a large degree. If it is there, it's very hard to spot it and know it's there. There is a sense that the paper is holding back, but that, I would say, is in comparison to the Times and to the other big news brands. And we heard Jerry Baker on Monday defending the coverage, saying that this is sort of a made-up problem that media reporters are focusing too much on. I'm trying to do more reporting on the Murdoch piece of it because I'd like to know more about how often Murdoch and the president are speaking. My sense is probably almost daily, but there are people motivated to say that, so I want to know more about that and what those conversations are. And, would like to know more about if that's trickling into the Journal or not. Yeah.
Final question, Brian.
Thanks for coming, Brian.
Thank you.
I'm Howard Crook. I've worked for 7 newspapers coast to coast and a wire service, including Newsday, New York Times, and the Post here. And I've had a lot of instruction on don't oversell something, don't emphasize, don't get emotional, be straightforward and all that. But it feels like now, I just turned 80, and I have never been afraid for our country as I am now. And it's like you want to cry out and say, it's almost like yelling fire in a theater or something, and how loud can we say fire, The one thing I grew up with was always wondering how a totally cultured and studied and advanced country as Germany could have fallen for Hitler. And I'm thinking, where was the press then? And why weren't there more voices, crying out? And my question now is, as journalists, how far can we go beyond just being very studied and unemotional and all that? Because I do think we're in trouble.
I'm reading The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich because I want to understand what you just asked. And specifically, because I feel I know nothing about the 1930s. And I see people throwing the word Nazi around, maybe completely irresponsibly, and I want to know more about it. When we see these swastikas and these images on the New York City subways, I want to understand that period in history. But I also find myself wanting to read about the civil rights movement and what the role of the press was in the 1960s between the civil rights movement and Vietnam. And the role of the press, in some cases, over the span of many years, covering a changing society. And I think I'm going to learn a lot more from those books once they come from Amazon. But that's where I've been focusing because I think you're raising something elemental about the news media right now. What does it mean to try to cry out when individual journalists are sensing specific dangers? I would point out, however, we're less than a month into a Trump presidency, and we are seeing this drip of leaks award-winning stories already being published by newspapers and by television networks. And we are seeing an enormous amount of information about this White House and this administration already becoming public and becoming available. We may have a problem if the country isn't paying attention to it, but I think a lot of viewers and readers are paying attention to it right now. And the guidance, to the degree that there is any guidance at all for me in my role and in CNN anchors' roles right now, is to state what is true and not to be intimidated by any administration's attempts to destabilize or delegitimize the press. And I think we're seeing that, and it may come across as emotional to some viewers. It may come across as over the top. I don't know. I don't think so, but it may when we look into the camera and make very clear that the president's wrong about something or that his aides are misleading about something. But I'm seeing a lot of that, and I'm seeing it not just on CNN, but also Scott Pelley on the CBS Evening News last night calling Kellyanne Conway a fearless fabulist, or last week saying the president was divorced from reality. You can see Pelley in his own way trying to figure out how to speak beyond the bounds of the normal 6:30 newscast and identify that something's different right now, that something unusual is happening. So what I see are a lot of journalists in their own ways trying to figure out how to do that. And debates about the use of the word lie on the front page of the New York Times, those are all, I think, related to this. How to cover that deeper level you're describing is something I don't know, but I would love your all's feedback and ideas about that. Honestly, especially ideas for my Sunday program, guests I should be having on, and segments I should be trying to host. So I'll close with my email address. It's bstelter@gmail. Very easy, just first initial, last name @gmail. And that's best way to get a hold of me if you have ideas or guest ideas, things I should be focusing on the program, because I very much would like to learn from all of you. So thank you very much for having me today. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. See you all next month.
Great, Bernie. Thank you.